welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 215th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 714th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of June 3rd, 2021. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment comes to us from Jared Morris, who you may remember from this show at various points in the past. He wrote this for me. I wasn't sure whether it was because he was so passionate about this topic or was not convinced that I would put forth the effort to do this, but I'm thankful for it either way. So this week's banner moment occurred on Tuesday when five-star freshman Tamar "Scoop" Bates arrived on campus. He was flanked by his family, who were eager to check out Scoop's new home. Remember, Tamar committed to Indiana and Mike Woodson without ever taking an official visit to Bloomington. Anytime a five-star talent arrives on campus for his freshman season, it's worthy of a banner moment, because while get old, stay old is a winning adage in college basketball, especially in the rough and tumble Big Ten, you still need top-end talent to compete for Big Ten titles and make NCAA tournament runs, two feats Indiana hasn't sniffed in half a decade. But with Tamar's arrival, Indiana now boasts three five-star recruits on its roster, with Trace Jackson-Davis and Christian Lander being the most highly touted holdovers from the previous regime. Will Tamar have the immediate impact that Trace did or that Romeo Langford did before him? Probably not. That's no knock on Tamar. It's just a reflection of how good Trace and Romeo were as freshmen and how unbalanced the rosters were when they stepped on campus. For some analytical context, Bart Torvik's T-rank projects a modest 5.8 points per game for Scoop. That's probably a good place to put the over-under for his freshman season. Personally, I'm bullish he'll hit the over. Jared wrote that. I'm also bullish he'll hit the over. And it's always smart to be patient with freshmen, no matter how talented they are or how mature they seem. Regardless, the offseason chatter and projections are just that. What matters is the impact Scoop actually makes come November and whether he breaks out this year, next year, or the year after that. Tamar Bates projects to be one of the most important players in the program and in the Big Ten Conference over the next few seasons. Time will tell if it results in a banner, but his arrival certainly is one more important step in that direction. And just to add on to that, for those who have not had a chance to listen to the interview that Scoop did with AJ Guyton on the House of Hoosier podcast, I would definitely recommend that. Seems like a really interesting kid that I think people are really going to like. I know Jay mentioned that in the community as well this week about that being a good listen. So would certainly encourage everybody to check that out. But with that, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for tonight. First, we have a special guest. You know him as one half of the hosting duo of the People's College Basketball Podcast, Titus and Tate. Grew up an IU fan before walking on at Ohio State, and you guys know the story. We've had him on a number of times after IU Ohio State games, always seeming to end in glee for him, as his alma mater has wiped the floor with IU in recent times every time we've had him on. But he certainly doesn't need a formal intro on this podcast. It is Mark Titus. Mark, we were talking before we went on. It's certainly been a more fruitful week in the world of college basketball than one might have expected for the first week of June. But what's top of mind for you tonight after a kind of a wild week?
It has been a wild week. Coach K announcing his retirement is certainly the type of story that would send shockwaves through the sport. I think that qualifies. I think that definitely qualifies as a although, like, for me, the Coach K press conference today has already, it's not like I'm already ready to talk about that press conference more so than like the actual act of the man retiring. I'm excited for this. Mark me down as one of the few people that like actually loves that he's doing a farewell tour and thinks as much as this is going to be nauseating for so many people, I think this is going to be hilarious, and I think it's going to be great throughout the entire season from a content perspective. So I'm excited. Let's go.
Yeah, the fact that Tate called this what was a month or so ago, and was I don't know, it wasn't even or was it a month? It was
more
May
than a month. It was
okay. It was late April, right?
Yeah, it was late April. And Tate is certainly, he'll let anybody pat him on the back. If you want to pat Tate on the back, he'll say, yes, I'll accept the compliments, but he's not going to be one that's like, hey, everybody look at me, I called this, necessarily, if that makes sense. There's a fine line, and he's not patting himself, but he'll let you pat him, right? And so I feel like it's my duty as the co-host to really pump his tires here, because this man showed up to do a show and he was grinning from ear to ear, and on April 26th. And I could not believe like how happy he was. And I asked him, I was like, what's going on, man? And he's like, I just got a phone call. I said, what was the phone call? And he said, Coach K is going to retire. And he's going to do a farewell tour. And I was like, how do you know that? And he's like, a guy in the know told me that they're already planning it. And I just rolled my eyes because I was like, yeah, because Tate's a Carolina fan. And so just saying anything bad about K or that K is leaving, he'll believe it. He'll believe anything you tell him. So I was like, yeah, I'm sure, Tate, I'm sure. So I laughed him off, and then here we go. We fast forward to this week. It happens, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, I gotta apologize to you. You called this. You actually had a scoop. He didn't predict it. He said, I have a source who told me that they're planning this, and I don't know. It's crazy. So anyway,
Titus and Tate, now a breaking news podcast.
Yeah. In the Scoops game.
Yeah, anything that allows us to get more Tate impressions of Coach K is a win in my book. So
right.
We're well on our way.
Right.
Well on our way.
Right. So I'm curious to see how he handles it, because K, I mean, we did an emergency show where he was kind of talking through his feelings, and I was shocked at how he wasn't like sad about it, but he wasn't as happy as I thought. Like there's some small part of him that's like, I need this man in my life, because you take him away, like I don't know what to do with I have all this hatred. I don't know where to channel it. I don't know, like there's a yin and a yang, good and evil. And if the evil goes away, like what happens next? And
I've been in the revenge business so long, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, you can see the wheels turning of like, I don't know what to do now. What do I do?
Oh, he'll hate John Shire just as much.
I know. Yeah.
All right, and to my left.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the.
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
We have the president of the Fernando Tatis Jr. fan club, Ryan Phillips. Ryan, I wish I had some of the drops that Jared had of you. Your thoughts on Coach K, where you called him a walking skeleton with a hairpiece, I believe, at one point. But I don't have that, unfortunately, on my soundboard. So you can feel free to recreate. But certainly, if you want to go a different direction with your rant, feel free. I give you the floor.
I've definitely had a contentious relationship with the man over the years. He is completely unaware of it. But I think the noteworthy thing about this is we can talk about Coach K and what he accomplished and all that. And he did accomplish a lot. I think something significant that's been glossed over is what he did for USA Basketball, and he and Kobe Bryant teaming up to recruit great players again to play for USA Basketball, and not, sort of treat the Olympics and representing the US as something of an afterthought. That was significant. And he had a lot to do with that. I mean, that whole group that they put together did. But I also think that, there's a reason there's some animosity there from a lot of people who aren't Carolina alums. And you can't argue with his record and with the things he accomplished. But at the same time, the most interesting part for me is the changing of the guard in college basketball. And you're seeing Roy Williams is now gone, and Coach K, and really of the old school guys who've been at one place a really long time, guys left. It's Jim Boeheim. Other guys have moved around, and I know Roy Williams coached at Kansas as well, but it always felt like he had his heart in Carolina. And so there is definitely a changing, and college basketball is changing. And I think that, these guys are also, let's face it, getting older and maybe not able to handle the stress anymore. But it is going to be different seeing a different person on the sidelines at North Carolina and a different person on the sidelines at Duke. And eventually, I think Jim Boeheim is going to coach forever, but eventually there too. And it's just fascinating to see this change, because these guys have been there since, I was in high school, and young, I mean, way younger for Coach K, but it just feels like college basketball is going to be different over the next few years. And there's going to be guys swapping out and changing, and Powers getting new head coaches. Indiana has one now. So, it's also becoming a younger man's game. You're seeing younger coaches get great jobs as well, which didn't happen for the longest time. And you're seeing it in the NBA too, guys with no experience or very little experience getting big jobs. So basketball is changing, and the way people think of basketball and the way people, want to set up their programs, and all of that is changing, and it's going to be different. And I think that's the fascinating thing to look at from Coach K walking away is, what does basketball look like in 5-10 years? How different is it? Because for a long time, it was kind of the same sport. You had the same exact philosophy everywhere. You had this, with little tweaks here and there. You had the same people built their programs the same way. They did this. One and done obviously changed that, but it didn't create a sea change wave across college basketball. This is starting to be a change for college basketball. And I think it'll be really fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. That just the change, the idea that, when we were growing up, and I'm gonna lump us all together. I'm not gonna bother asking how old we all are, but let's be honest, we're all about. Well, we're gonna put us all together. I don't know about you guys. Like when I was growing up, I was an NBA fan. I preferred college basketball. I grew up in Indiana. The Pacers were. They were good. Reggie was good and all that, but like you grow up in Indiana, that's how it works. You just love college basketball. You pick a side, Indiana or Purdue or whatever else. But you love basketball. Basketball was basketball. So if there was basketball on in my house, we watched it. We didn't care what it was. And what's so fascinating to me, just hearing you talk about the changes that have happened, is like the rift between the NBA and college. And this is happening at like a media level too, where like, for God's sakes, like Woj, screw Woj, dude. Like I hate that dude now. Like I don't even know the guy, but like when he put out the tweet about like when Stevens to IU was kind of a thing there for a second, he was like, let me be clear. No NBA coach would ever, under any circumstances, ever go to. It's like, dude, shut up. Like you're just like a mouthpiece for the, like, who are you? Shut the hell. And like, how does that help anybody? And so my point is, I guess, is like watching all these changes happen, and there's like this divisiveness where you have to now pick between the NBA and college, because in part they are two different sports now. It's like two different, all the changes that are happening, like the world is moving so fast, and I guess that's how society works at large. But it's like, my God, the changes that happen in college basketball used to be slow. It used to be like, we'll introduce the shot clock and let's test this out for like years. Let's like really think about it.
They debated moving the 3-point line back for like 7 years before.
Yes. And now it's like, oh my God, it's one thing after another. Transfers are now approved here. And this is the transfer stuff happened so fast. And I think most people think it's a good thing. And I don't know. I think like, a lot of the coaches don't love it. And how much of that is because the coaches makes their jobs harder, and how much of it is because they like genuinely care about the players, and they're like, I think this is going to be bad for players, and there are some downsides that people aren't thinking about. I don't know. But the point is you're right, Ryan, that these changes are happening so fast. And to have now Roy Williams' retirement, Coach K's retirement on top of that, it is a little jarring to think of like what the sport will look like in say 5 years, because they're not done. Like, as you mentioned, Boeheim. Boeheim said, I saw somewhere he said he's going to coach till he's 80, which, you read that headline, you're like, oh my God, that's going to be a long time. And then you remember the guy's like, probably, was he turn 80 next month?
Yeah. Is it next week?
But yeah, so like Boeheim, Izzo, Leonard Hamilton certainly isn't of that quite caliber, but he's a big name, and Florida State's had an awesome program recently. He's not a young man. Jim Larrañaga has been to Final Fours and won the ACC in Miami. It's so, you start looking around, you're like, this is the change of the guard is coming, and the change is happening, and it's alarming. And college basketball has certainly historically not been a sport that has been receptive to change. I think the people that love college basketball are not the type of people that love change. They're the type of people that like, I want to watch the same sport.
Tradition.
Tradition. My grandfather watched this, and don't build new gyms, don't move anything, keep it all the same. And so kind of taking that all into account of like where we're at now in 2021, it can be a little jarring, but I think like my message of optimism to the people is that Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, the lack of a 3-point line, the lack of a shot, like none of these things are what make college basketball awesome. It is the fans, it is the institutions, it is the marriage of these institutions that we all go to school at, or like we know people that or our parents went to school, so like we got indoctrinated with it. It's the marriage of those institutions that are so important to our communities and to our upbringings and all that stuff, with the basketball teams themselves. That's what brings it together. That's what will make it last. That's what I will yell till I'm red in the face about people that think the overtime league or the G League or whatever else are going to be a threat to college basketball. And I try to tell these people that don't really know much about college basketball. I swear to God, you could put like third graders in Indiana and Purdue jerseys, and every person in Indiana will watch it. They don't care. They don't need LeBron James level players. And like, if this team represents Indiana and this team represents Purdue, I'm watching it and I'm booing the team in black and gold. Like, that's how it works. And it doesn't matter where the talent level. I mean, like, obviously we all want them to be super talented players, but it's not about the players. It's in a lot of ways not about the coaches as much as like that is the narrative around college basketball, that it is the coaches. It's not. It's the programs. It's the fans. It's the institutions. And Mike Krzyzewski will leave a big void when he leaves. But the beat goes on. John Wooden left a big gap. Dean Smith did. Bob Knight, like the list goes on, and it has survived and it will survive. So that's my rant on the matter.
I like it. That's a good way to wrap up that part of it for sure. I was thinking the same thing about what you said about the overtime league and all that. It's sort of like if a small fraction of players leaving is not going to drive the sport into the ground. So I would agree. All right. So this week on the show, we are going to cover Hoosier headlines, which are going to be largely about college basketball in general. There's a rule change we wanted to talk about, and then I guess a little bit the Brad Stevens news. Then mainly wanted to talk to Mark and get his thoughts on IU's offseason so far, and how he's feeling about the Mike Woodson era to this point. And we'll end by answering your questions as we always do. All of that coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. All right, and let me get the right stuff going here. And all right, so before we get to Hoosier headlines, we wanted to take a minute and introduce you to Manscaped, who provides support for our podcast. Now, I know we've had some laughs over the last couple of weeks because of the sponsorship. Coach even got his wife to do a couple drops for the for the promotion. So we have had some laughs, but we did want to talk about the sponsorship and talk about how important it is. So we don't want to let the occasional silliness of the ads that we've done overshadow the efficacy of the product. Nice work by Jared to throw in efficacy to try to throw me off. Bottom line is that Manscaped's product line is the best in the industry when it comes to male grooming, starting with the Lawnmower 4.0. With the Lawnmower, Manscaped engineered the ultimate groin and body trimmer to focus on intelligent functionality and an incredibly comfortable grooming experience. They sent all of us our own lawnmower, and we all agree that it works better than any other groin grooming solution we've tried. And I know that the idea of groin grooming can induce pangs of fear, but fear not. Manscaped's 4th-generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. Plus, it features wireless charging and a 4000K LED light that you can use for a more precise shave. And as you hopefully realize, Father's Day is coming up fast. Manscaped's products make a great gift for dads and sons everywhere. Over 2 million men worldwide are already Manscaped, and we have this exclusive offer for you. Get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code AC at manscaped.com. And that's promo code AC at manscaped.com for 20% off your order and free worldwide shipping. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. All right, so on to Hoosier headlines. So first one in here is a new rule. This was passed, I think it's temporary at this point, but the rule was passed by the Division I Council Coordination Committee, which allows 2 non-coaching members of any college basketball program to conduct instructional on-court activities during the 8-week summer session that begins on June 4th, which I believe is tomorrow. According to the release, the committee supported the changes due to the increased need for full-time assistant coaches to be recruiting after a dead period that lasted more than a year, and the likely larger number of new players on teams for 2021-22 because of the change in transfer rules. So the existing rule allows assistant coaches to work with players for up to 8 hours per week, no more than 2 hours a day on various skill-related instruction. So I guess as we think about that, certainly seems like a good thing for them, and something that may become permanent as we go through that. But Mark, from your perspective, this, I think where IU fans take this is, does this get Thad Matta back on the court for this time period? Is he a guy who is able to help out with that? And kind of the question for you is, in that capacity, what's his approach to skill development and that kind of instruction, and in terms of your experience with him over the summer and during the seasons that you were there?
This is the Thad Matta rule, right? This has to be considered.
It must be.
This is we're gonna call it the Thad Matta rule for sure. No, this is gonna be great. I mean, the skill work is something that coach definitely excels at, because I think to be great at skill work, and I beat this point home last time I think I was on the program. We were talking about Mike Woodson and Thad Matta and what they're gonna bring to the table and all that. What Thad excels at. I'm sorry, Coach. He'd kill me if you heard me call him that. What Coach excels at is relationships. That's what he's great at. He's great at one-on-one. He's great at like really just figuring out number one, what can you do to make the team better, but number two, like what are you trying to accomplish as an individual? What makes you tick? What makes you good? Like all of that. That is what Thad Matta is awesome at. And to me, like that is on court skill work. I mean, he's great at it off the court because he's a great human being and he knows how to connect with guys on that level. But that comes out in skill work too, is that he's got an eye for what guys need to improve, how to improve them. I mean, the guy's resume is absolutely insane. I am very, very biased, but I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the history of college basketball. It's like, it's staggering how much he won, to the point that like, even if you remember him as a good coach and you went back and looked at how many titles, Big Ten tournament, Big Ten regular season, whatever things that he won, it'll still blow you away. And the guy knows the game. The guy knows how to coach. And I imagine he's going to get his hands involved in some skill work here now.
Well, Mark, as a former player, do you think this changes the offseason for current players? I mean, being able to actually work with people on stuff.
Yeah, I think
officially, in an official capacity.
Yeah, there's a lot of the rules have changed a lot since even I was there. I mean, I'm starting to get little gray hair, and I'm getting longer in the tooth myself. But no, the summer there was definitely some structure to it, but there's a lot of there frankly was just a lot of like, you got to get in the gym and work on your own game, which is why I was so bad, because I was not getting in the gym. I was going to the quad to to check out sunbathers, like that's what I was doing. So the guys that's honestly what made our team so good at Ohio State, was we had a lot of guys that were wired that way to just like the John Dieblers and Dave Leighties and Evan Turners of the world. They were just like, they were gym rats, man. And they would get in there by themselves and get as many shots up, and they could motivate themselves. And I think having someone now be able to step into position and kind of orchestrate what's going on in these workouts and these practices or whatever, it is going to be a huge advantage, especially for a team like Indiana that, there are a lot of guys back, but there are a lot of new guys too. And I don't, you said Bates just showed up on campus. I don't know how well does he know the rest of the guys on the team? And maybe, Trace Jackson Davis is not, yelling at him, but kind of trying to motivate him in a workout at some point. And he's looking at him like, dude, who are you? Like, I just met, like, what's going, like maybe,
especially these kids who were recruited via Zoom instead of being on campus and getting to meet people.
So instead of it falling on Trace Jackson Davis to be the leader, to not yell, but motivate, whatever it is, guys that they don't really know that well, insert, say, a Thad Matta. Now he can kind of like be the overlord of everything and kind of put guys in the right spot. Is it going to make a difference in terms of wins and losses in the long run? I don't know. It might. I don't know. This stuff is granular. It's like, it might help build relationships that can make it better. But I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like because IU has Thad Matta at their disposal and other schools don't, like they're going to win 5 more games this year than everyone else. But this is certainly a great thing for Indiana for sure. Yeah.
All right. The other bit of news that we alluded to was the Brad Stevens moving into the Celtics front office. So I think most IU fans took the opportunity to try to connect dots that may or may not need to be connected with this news and the other offseason news there. But Ryan, what was your impression upon hearing the news of Stevens moving into that role, which was quickly surpassed by the Coach K news that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, talk about burying the news right there. But I would say, I mean, look, when I talk to anybody close to this situation on either Indiana's side or Boston's side, when I did digging around the time that Indiana was looking at him, everybody said that he was struggling as the coach of the Celtics. And he was, the word came out of being burned out. And I didn't think of that word at the time, but I think that in hindsight, it seems like that's what it was. I think that 8 years anywhere is a long time, especially with a lot of the same players. And sometimes your voice just doesn't carry the way it does the first year, you're with a player. And there were, stories about the Celtics, people said tuning him out, but maybe just not reacting to what he wanted as quickly. And maybe guys just kind of frustrated with the relationship. 8 years is an eternity in the NBA, by the way. And so for him to sort of step away from that wasn't shocking. I think that's why people who actually knew the situation thought he might go to Indiana and thought that he would at least consider Indiana. It had, he thought he had a great job, but it just wasn't as fulfilling as it had been in the past. That's what I was told. Now, however much of that, if you ask Brad Stevens, I doubt he phrases it that way, but that's what I was told repeatedly. And there was a point where Indiana thought they had a really good chance at getting him. And the next day, those chances evaporated. And that was when the Mass Hole press conference happened. They knew heading into the Mass Hole press conference that basically it was over. And I wouldn't be shocked if some kind of deal was worked out with the Celtics back then about some form of a transition, or maybe Danny might be going to the Jazz and leaving. So, maybe there's a spot for you here to sort of take a Popovich role. And then he decided he didn't want to coach anymore for a while. I think Brad Stevens is going to coach again in a couple of years. I think he's going to miss it. I think he doesn't want to coach this team right now next year. And so we'll see. Maybe, in a couple of years, he decides, I like this whole president of basketball operations thing. I want to go to the Pacers and be a head coach again, but I want to be the president of basketball operations as well. And again, the way Popovich does it, somewhere, I'm throwing the Pacers out because it's Indiana, but somewhere else. And so my reaction was kind of that makes sense, because I have been told that he was not having a blast, and it wasn't successful on the court. It showed that with the Celtics this year. I know they were burned out. They had a very short offseason with the bubble and everything. All those top 4 teams struggled this year. Denver was the only one that didn't, and they also got the greatest performance ever by a center in the NBA, so that really helped. But all 4 teams that were the Final Four in the bubble really struggled this year. And I think that and some other things wore him down, and I'm not really surprised that he moved on to something else. I'm surprised he stayed with the Celtics. I'm surprised he became the president of basketball operations. I did not see that coming, but looking back with hindsight, it all kind of makes sense.
All right. Well,
Mark, what did you think, Mark? I want to know what your thoughts are.
I mean, Ryan, you kind of hit everything I was going to say. I mean, like, honestly, if there's a way I could just say same and be done with it like that, like you hit all the points. Like, no, I agree with you on the timeline as well. That I mean, listen, we're all biased here. Like, we kind of, looking back at that period of time, we all obviously wanted Brad to come to IU. So we probably looked at it through those glasses. But I do think the timeline was like he was considering it, and like he must have used this as leverage. Like he must have, as he was considering, gone to Danny and said, like, I don't know. I'm considering like and then Danny's like, why would you consider this? You're the coach of the Celtics. I don't know how it went down, but like that was the point in time where something must have happened, right? Because as you said, watching the Celtics all season, I remember there's one press conference he was doing, a post-game press conference, where you could hear like Jason Tatum like behind him in the locker room, like throwing stuff or yelling at somebody. And then Brad's like got a straight face and he's like, yeah, our chemistry's great. I don't know why people are pretending like it's not. And you could just see it was wearing on him. And you're absolutely right that 8 years is a long time. And that was kind of my point that I was trying to make to people when I was trying to meme Brad to Indiana. Was like the difference between this and last time was that, frankly, the Celtics aren't on the come up anymore. I don't know if this was this year was an anomaly or whether they're on the decline, whatever, but that's where they're at is 8. He's been there for 8 years. It's 7-year itch is real, I think. And that's a long time for coaches to be there. And I don't know, the moment he took the Celtics job, I remember, and I think I might have the receipts. This is kind of eerie to look back on, but the moment he took the Celtics job, I think I tweeted something like, he's going to go to Boston for like 5 or 6 years. And then when he gets fired, he'll take over for K at Duke. And that's like not going to happen. But also The fact that like both of those
dangerously close.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
fact that like both of those
seriously.
hit at the same time, I was like, oh, wait. But the point was like, I remember thinking when he took over the Celtics, I was like, the if you look at like who are the longest, I think Eric Spoelstra is the second longest tenured coach in the NBA.
Yeah.
And it's like Spoelstra, Pop, and Carlisle are like the three that have been there for like any significant amount of time. To where even if you're good, even if you're a good NBA coach, like
look at Dwayne Casey. He had a great record with the Raptors, and they let him go. And
Nate McMillan with the Pacers.
Yeah,
you can be a good coach in the NBA, and it could just be not the right fit. It could be the star doesn't like you. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so in that regard, for an NBA coach at the 8-year mark to decide, when the standard is kind of at least Eastern Conference Finals, if not higher in Boston, and you're getting kind of a gentleman's sweep in the first round, for him to look it around and just be like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. That doesn't surprise me. But I'm with you, Ryan. He's going to coach again. If you think Brad Stevens has coached his last game, you're out of your mind.
Yeah, and somebody said, well, what does he do this for 1 year and then he's at Duke? I'm sure they're writing into his contract. He's got to do this for a while. He's not just going to leave him high and dry next year. So maybe he coaches Duke in the future. Maybe maybe bunch of years down the line, hopefully, if Mike Woodson's successful, he takes over, whatever.
Okay, so I want to have that conversation with you because where does the IU fan base, because I don't want to pretend like I'm as invested as you guys. Where do we land on that? Like, let's just go there. Why not? Mike Woodson, 5 years from now, he's made 3 Final Fours. IU is back. We mean it for real this time. Maybe a national title was won, but Mike Woodson, he's like, I did what I came to do. I got IU back. I'm a little old now. We're back. I'm done. I retire. Is the Brad Stevens, the IU train back on? Is it back on the menu? Are we memeing it, do you think? Or are you like, no, we're done with that. We tried it. He turned us down. He's a masshole. We don't want him.
I think some people would have exactly what you just said. Would have that he's a masshole, like whatever, that was embarrassing, whatever. I think a significant portion of the fan base would be like, "Hey, what's Brad Stevens?
Let's run it back."
But I also think that if they're that successful, Dane Fife's on the staff. There would be a significant chance people just elevate him.
That's a good point.
But I would say no. I would say that I think, and I said today, somebody Jared tweeted out that I don't even want to consider Brad Stevens, blah blah blah, and he tweeted out from the Assembly Call account. I was like, well, you're not speaking for all of us, but he said something about IU fans have moved on, they're all in on Mike Woodson. I'm like, no, I think a significant portion of people are all in on Mike Woodson. That doesn't mean that if they were given the chance right now to change it, I think it'd probably be like 53 to 47 in favor of Brad Stevens.
I'm gonna stop. Yeah. I don't like that. By the way, I don't like that.
I don't agree. I agree with you.
I think Woody is the man for the job right now. I agree. I would not, if I could hit that button right now and Brad Stevens takes over for Mike Woodson, I'm not hitting it if I'm an IU fan.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm saying what I think the IU fan, and I think the one thing that Stevens would have going for him in that context is you get Brad Stevens, he's your coach for the next 30 years, as opposed to Woodson, we're going to have to do another coaching search within the next 10, if assuming everything goes well. I'm just saying what I think the pulse is, but I do think that right now, get Brad Stevens out of the equation. Everybody's all in on Mike Woodson. I agree with that. And I think that, and I'm somebody who is skeptical of certain aspects of his hire and that, but I think every move he's made since his hiring, I am fully on board with. I don't think he's made a misstep. And I think that it's been perfect so far.
I was just curious of using LeBron as an analogy with Cleveland. How badly did we burn the Brad Stevens jerseys when he said I'm a masshole? Like Cleveland did, where they're like, screw this guy forever. I hate him so. What, LeBron, you want to come back? Okay, never mind. We love you.
Exactly. I think that's where we're at. Sports fans forget real fast.
Yeah,
they forget.
Yeah, I think there'd be a component of that, depending upon how things went with Woodson. I think if they went well, to Ryan's point, I think people would turn to Fife or maybe even like a Kenya Hunter, since he's, would have been here for a while at that point and has been, done a good job recruiting. But I think if things don't go that well, then I think absolutely everybody would be a lot more likely to buy back into that, as opposed to, going hand the keys over to Fife, who's been there while things have turned around, or Hunter in that scenario. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe we'll all still be doing this, and
hopefully something we don't have to worry about for a long time.
And then we can figure it out. All right. Well, that will do it for the first segment. We'll turn our attention to the Hoosiers next, a little bit more, and talk through more of what Mark thinks about IU's offseason, And we'll talk about that next year on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. All right, welcome, chat mob, everybody. Maybe the longest first segment in our history. But you get Coach K, you get Brad Stevens. I mean, this is
a blast. What are you talking about? That went by fast.
This is what happens. Yeah, we got some. I know Jen in the chat said that Stevens declaring himself a Patriots or Cheatriots fan, as she said, ends any chance he has of coming back. But
yeah, that hurt.
That hurt. Yeah, that had to hurt for you guys.
That's a tough
I'm not a Colts fan, but that I could feel that like residual. Like
it felt like he was being held hostage when he did that whole interview.
Yeah,
like,
there was
really
a gun just off camera,
and he was like reading a script. Where it's like I don't know.
Maybe that was a condition of his new position. Was like, yeah, we need you to get out there in front of people. Don't be too robotic, but we need you to hit these key points.
Yeah,
man,
that was rough. That was rough. But I mean, and somebody explained to me like, well, his kids like have now grown up there, so they're probably Patriots fans. So I'm like, no, that's not an excuse.
No, yeah. And also you can say you can express the exact same sentiment without taking it that far. Like you could
Mark, you've lived in LA for a little bit now. Are you all of a sudden a Rams fan? Like
no,
exactly.
That's why I was so offended, is because I don't live in Indiana anymore. I haven't lived in Indiana since I was 18, and if you ask me, I'd say I'm a Hoosier. Like that's like. Yeah, I've lived almost half of my life outside of the state of Indiana at this point. And I'm a Hoosier. I will always be a Hoosier, no matter how tan this face gets, no matter how much plastic surgery I get in LA. No matter how many kale salads.
You were looking fresher. I thought you were looking a little fresh.
No matter how many kale salads I eat, goddamn it, I'm going to be a Hoosier till the day I die. And so to have him say he's a masshole, I was like, oh. It's devastating.
That was pretty rough.
Fantastic. All right, we'll talk some IU next, and then we'll go from there. I'll get us started here in a second.
Okay.
Hi, this is Jawan Morgan. What's the only thing better than getting IU's first triple-double in 47 years? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
And welcome back to the Assembly Call. So how do you keep up with the fire hose of information that comes out almost every day about IU basketball? It's crazy during the offseason and even crazier during the season. Well, we've got your back. We send out a free weekly email newsletter on Sunday mornings. Rounds up the most important and interesting IU basketball stories from the previous week to keep you up to date on your Hoosiers. Over 8,000 of your fellow IU fans are already on the list, and we want you to be on there as well. So go to join.assemblycall.com to subscribe for free now. That's join.assemblycall.com. You can also text IU to 66866. Again, that's IU to 66866. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and our special guest, Mark Titus, and wanted to talk a little bit more about IU with Mark to get his impressions of how the offseason's gone. So I guess maybe the first place to start, Mark, is to, kind of as you think about what your reaction to the Woodson hiring was initially and kind of your feelings about how it is now, how has that changed over that time? I assume you, like most IU fans, are feeling more comfortable, but what's kind of been the biggest change for you since hearing him announce to where we are in June?
Yeah, my initial reaction when it was announced was, I think like a lot of people, a little lukewarm. I'm talking like the moment it was announced. Like I see the name, like gut, split second reaction. So I did what I do in a lot of instances when something happens pertaining to Indiana basketball. I called my father and I said, Dad, help me make sense of this. And my dad, my dad's an Indiana alum. My dad is the biggest Indiana fan I know is, I don't know. He's like a lot of people's listen, like a lot of your dads of our listeners tonight. But with that, he also is the kind of Indiana fan who's in his 60s that hates everything about Indiana at all times, and I love my dad, but he's also like, you call him after a win and he's like, we had too many turnovers. And that's like, that's all he wants to talk about, so we got to clean that up and whatever. So when I called my dad and I said, what give me something about Woody. Like, what are your thoughts? And he was over the moon. He was so excited in the moment. He was like, Mike Woodson, Mark, I'm telling you, I genuinely think this. He's going to be better than Brad Stevens would have been if Indiana would hire Brad Stevens. And I was like, what? And he's like, Mike Woodson is, I'm telling you, the guy is, he is just so likable. He is such a good dude. He knows the game better than, and he just going on and on selling him. And I was like, all right, Dad, I'll commit to IU. Is that what's going on here? So when my dad, because my dad was there at Indiana. My dad was there like during basically the Woodson years. My dad, and he was kind of involved with the basketball. Like my dad was roommates with Butch Carter in the late 70s, early 80s at Indiana. And so he was like, he was kind of like I was with Ohio State, except he didn't officially walk on, like he was kind of always involved. He'd go to the hyper and like play with the guys, but I don't know. He was probably scared at night. That's really what it was, if we're being honest. He's probably just like, I don't want to deal with that. So anyway, my dad was just feeding me all this info about Woodson. So from that moment on, I was like, all right, I have no choice but to leave my father. And basically every single thing that has happened since then, I've just called my dad and be like, you said this would happen. Like, I can't believe I doubted this, or I thought this might not work out. And the famous example, I guess that I'm sure everyone listening knows, remembers, and that's kind of like I think the big offseason moment was Trace coming back, but not just Trace coming back, but like talking out that process, how that went when you met Mike Woodson, and the famous quote, or at least it's famous to me, I'll remember this forever, that he said he wasn't showing me what I'm good at, he was showing me what I needed to work at, and that struck me, and that's what Trace said. That kind of stuff is what my dad told me that Woodson would bring to the table, and the fact that he's doing it, I don't know. So I think it's maybe not perfect. I feel like Jerome Hunter. I love Jerome Hunter. Him not sticking around is more of like a sentimental thing. I don't know if IU's really going to be sweating his lost production per se, but like I loved how hard he played and all that. Armand, I think, is a little more. That one kind of hurt, I think, yeah. But I think they're going to be fine. Outside of that, like I don't know where he was a swing and miss. Like Keon Brooks didn't transfer like everyone thought. Like I don't know what else. I don't know what else Mike Woodson could have done in the offseason that's better than what he did. To get Trace back, Xavier coming in, and Tamar. Like that's the big three. And then you sprinkle in guys like Miller Kopp, who I think is going to be awesome for Indiana. And I think the role
fits exactly what they want to do.
So too. Good. So good. And he very clearly, it wasn't like a haphazard deal where Woodson took over and said, all right, we have to get better. Let me just Google the transfer portal and throw some scholarships at the best players. Like he very clearly like had a plan and was going through this. And, shooting was I don't need to tell IU fans. I mean, it's been a disaster for the Hoosiers, and to get guys that can put the ball in the basket. I don't know. So he's knocked it out of the park. I'm like every other IU fan. I think he's knocked it out of the park, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here.
Yeah. So as you think about, touch on the roster a little bit with, with what we talked about, I think there's been a component of discussion around how do you keep everybody happy, both with the, the three guys that you talked about with them bringing in. You got Durr that came in from South Florida as well. You've got, Race Thompson back, all these guys. How much credence do you put into some of those kinds of conversations of like, are there enough minutes to go around? And yeah, I mean, you can certainly put it in IU specific context here, but just from, kind of having, played on the team, like, is that really a thing that coaches worry that much about, that players worry a ton about? Like, or is that just overblown because people look at a roster and they're like, oh, I think this guy should play, and they all can't play.
It's honestly team to team. I think it just depends on the makeup of the team. It depends on what the mental makeup of these guys and whether they're willing to buy in. And that sounds cliche and stupid, but it is what it is. I mean, like I look at the difference just drawing on my experience. The 2007 team I was on, I went to the Final Four and we lost to Florida in the title game. We were loaded with talent. We were so good. I mean, Greg Oden and Mike Conley and Ivan Harris was one of our starters. Like nobody, if you ask people to name the 5 starters on that team, nobody would remember Ivan Harris. Ivan Harris was a McDonald's All-American. He was awesome, and he in high school. And like by the time he's a senior at Ohio State, he has to defer to 17, 18-year-olds. Like we had Daquan Quick coming off the bench. We were loaded, and what made that team so good is that Greg Oden was by far the most talented player. And Greg Oden did not care what Greg Oden's stats were. And that trickled down to the whole team. And there was just like a Nobody cared. No one looked at the box score. I mean, that's not true. Daquan Cook definitely did. Daquan was definitely aware of how many points he had scored at all times. But the team was not worried about how many minutes. That was how David Lighty was a freshman on that team and should have. If David Lighty plays basically any other team other than Florida, if David Lighty plays anywhere else in the country, he's getting significant minutes. On that team, they just kind of threw him in here and there to play defense and stuff. Fast forward to the next year, 2008, we still had a ton of talent. Costa Koufos comes in. Jamar Butler still stuck around. Othello Hunter was still on the team. He played in the NBA for a little while. We were loaded with talent that year, and we had kind of what the fear would be is like all those guys were like worried about God knows what. I think Jamar was focused on like the year before. He's kind of playing second fiddle to Mike Conley. Now he's a senior. He wants to show off what he can do, and Costa was a one and done guy that's like, this is my one pit stop, like I should be running this team. And we were an absolute mess to the point that we missed the NCAA tournament. We go to the NIT and we were so talented, we steamrolled everybody through the NIT. It was like a joke that we were there. We were so good that year, but it never clicked. So I guess like just from my experience, it really truly depends on the makeup of the team. And so I can't say how this is going to go because I don't know the guys that well, but fingers crossed. I mean, if Coach Matta and Coach Woodson are as good at that part of the job as I think they are of bringing a group of guys together, I don't think it'll be a problem. But we'll see. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, and also, I mean, let's be real. In most cases, it's easier to be on the bench if you're winning. Like it's much so if your team's winning and you're sitting out, or you maybe not playing as much as you think you should. If you're winning, it's easier to justify, well, we won. I couldn't have, it's not like I can go in there. But if you're losing, your first thought as a bench player, a lot of bench players, the first thought is, I could have helped that. I could have fixed that. I could have, and you can't do that if the team is having a lot of success. So a lot of it, I do agree that I think there's a mentality that teams have to have, but also throughout the season, if you're winning games,
you're right.
Guys are excited to be on the bench and cheering and involved and all that. Some guys won't be. Some guys just want to play, and some guys want to put up numbers, and it's more of a selfish thing. But in general, yeah, if you're having success, it's easier to be sitting on the sidelines and maybe say like, this is my role on this team to help us win. And next year, when some of these guys are gone, that's when I'll have my chance to help the team win more or whatever. But yeah, I think success is a big part of that attitude.
I think you're absolutely right. I have to believe that most guys want to be a part of something special, whatever that part can be. And I think you identify that, like, if something special is happening here, I want to stick around and be a part of this and buy in and do whatever I can to be a part of it. And, but there are guys that aren't, as you said.
Of course, yeah.
Fingers crossed that those guys are not in the Indiana locker room this year.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Woodson in his recent press availability and even hearing this from the guys, it ties a little bit together, Mark, with what you talked about with, hearing Trace say he told me the things I didn't want to hear. He's been fairly candid in terms of being asked those questions, and that you're going to earn, if you're going to play, you're going to earn it. And it certainly doesn't seem to be afraid to tell guys he's recruiting, whether from inside or outside the program, his opinion of what they need to do to either earn more playing time or to improve and things like that. So I at least feels like he's set the tone of that. That's easy to say now when you're not playing games and you're not in the emotion of the winning and losing that you were just talking about, Ryan. So I think it's probably a good foundation being laid, and that just remains to be seen.
How can you be one of these guys and have Mike Woodson tell you that you're simply not good enough at XYZ to play at the next level? We need to get you better, and not believe him. That's the part that, like,
he comes with so much credibility.
So much. Is there a more credible coach? Like, honestly, in college basketball right now, I mean, like, when it comes to that, like, what coach in college basketball knows what it takes to be great in the NBA more than Mike Woodson does? Like, so that part of it is the part that I think is the reason to be optimistic about some of the issues we're fearful of, is that other coaches in his shoes would say that stuff, but they have no credibility to back it up. So if you're the kid on the other side of the desk, you're like, who are you? Who are you, Will Wade? Like, what? Will Wade, you're 36. What are you talking to me about? Like, what? But Mike Woodson says it's like, all right, if you're the kid, I mean, you have to be a moron to not listen to him or believe what he's saying. Like, he's, and just for him to have that attitude, I I don't know. That's awesome, and I think it's going to pay huge dividends for him.
Well, I also think it sets up a dichotomy where a lot of these coaches tell kids exactly what they want to hear because you're recruiting. You're constantly recruiting, and it's this thing where you put your best foot forward in your recruiting, and you sell the world. It's their job to do that. But to come at it with that sort of different approach that cuts across the grain, it's going to stand out, amongst that group of things. And the other thing about Woodson, it's not just the coaching. I mean, he played in the NBA. He was a great college player, played in the NBA. Then he went on and had this long coaching career in the NBA where he coached and interacted with so many great players. I mean, you're right. The instant credibility that guy has with players. I mean, even though, he played a long time ago, he still knows what it is. And he wore that jersey. And so there's so many elements of it that I think I overlooked initially that work out long-term for Indiana. And again, the only question I have is what's he going to run? What's the defense going to be like? That's the only question I have now. And I just think he's smart enough to figure it out.
He'll figure it out because I want to reiterate to people that have been have brought up similar points of but can Mike Woodson coach the college game? Can he coach? And it's like, listen, look who's on the other bench that this man is going to be coaching against. He's going up against Mark Turgeon and Greg Gard and, Chris Collins, for God's sakes. I think he's going to be all right. It's not like,
yeah, those guys have developed systems.
I mean, what are we talking about here? This is it. I think that's just something where your mind goes, where you're trying to think of cons to Mike Woodson taking over. You're like, well, are we sure he knows how to coach the college? It's like, yes, we're sure. We're sure he knows how to coach basketball.
And the other thing is that you mentioned earlier the NBA and college basketball are completely different worlds. They're completely different sports. But you're seeing a lot of the offensive sets from the NBA start to find their way into college basketball. A lot more up-tempo, a lot more three-point shooting, things like that. I think that's an advantage for Woodson coming, given that he's defended. He had to game plan defenses for that, and he's had to implement offenses like that before. So I think there's definitely some crossover there that will inevitably help Indiana.
The moment for me that if you're not buying into Mike Woodson, you definitely did when you saw this, was when he goes back to New York. I think he was moving his stuff. I think he was literally just back there packing up his moving truck to drive to Bloomington. And he goes to the Knicks game, and Julius Randle, a guy who is a Kentucky I don't know what constitutes a legend in Kentucky, but a guy that leads you to a national title game and is an All-American. In my eyes, that's a Kentucky legend. Sees the head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers and runs over, gives him a big bear hug, and and then there are other Kentucky. There's 1,000 Kentucky guys on the Knicks, and I'm like, what bizarro world are we living in here, where all these Kentucky guys are going up to the current head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers and giving him a big hug and saying, "I love you, coach." I mean, come on.
Yeah, it was free advertising for Indiana as well.
Come on,
it was great. Yeah. Thank you, Knicks, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark, any guys that are particularly intriguing for you to see on the IU roster in Woodson's system, whether those be guys that are coming back or even some of the new faces that he brought in?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know a ton about Xavier Johnson. I didn't follow him much at Pitt because Pitt's not been awesome. So I'm not going to pretend. And Bates, I just trust everyone else. I hope he's as good as everyone says. So for me, as a guy who's watched Miller Kopp, and he had an awesome year a couple years ago, and this past year was kind of trying to figure out his role. He's a guy that stands out to me. I mean, obviously Trace is the big one, to see what Trace will be under Woodson. And I don't know. I guess the one worry I might have is I don't want Trace to pull a Nigel Hayes, which is I apologies to the Nigel Hayes family, but I always, my mind immediately goes to Nigel Hayes whenever I think about this scenario, where he wants to make the NBA so badly that like Nigel Hayes comes back for his final year at Wisconsin. All of a sudden he's sitting he's throwing up jab step threes, and you're like, what? Where did this come from? And it was very clearly he was trying to show off. He went to the combine or something, and the scouts were like, "You're not good enough at shooting." He's like, "All right, well, I'm gonna shoot 33s a game next year." So I hope that's not happening. I trust it won't be a problem. But I'm removing the guys who are the big stars and the guys that have got all the headlines. Miller Kopp is my answer, because I think his skill set will be perfect. I think not just in Woodson's system and Woodson's way to get his skill set out of him. I think the complement of the team he's around, I think everything about it is lined up perfectly for Miller Kopp to have a big year and a big couple years maybe. So He's a senior though. He's a senior. Big.
I think he'll have another year though if he wants.
He'll have another year?
Free year from last year.
Free year?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Either way,
I think he can play 2 if he wants.
Miller Kopp is with like he when he's on, he reminds me of Duncan Robinson, and
great call.
Don't say that lightly. And I really, really feel like if I'm trying to convince Miller Kopp that he can be something at the next level, I'm just showing him Duncan Robinson stuff left and right and saying like, this is who you can beat. Now take this seriously. And I'm excited to see what Miller Kopp can be for Indiana because I think he's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I did a scouting report of him for a show a couple weeks ago, and one thing that struck me with him was his hustle too. Like he was a guy who first gets back on defense and dives on the floor and does things like that. I mean, you think of him, you think of the shooting, and he does have a mid-range game too outside of the threes. But what was interesting to me was how much of the little stuff he does, and I think there's guys on Indiana's team that do that. But at the same time, like having another guy who does that outside of Race Thompson and maybe Jerome Hunter and some other guys, I think that just elevates the energy on the floor at all times. Is having somebody who's willing to expend that energy, it rubs off on the guys around them. So that's a download thing that I think Miller Kopp will add to this team too.
Yeah, I think at a complementary type role, he can be really effective doing exactly what you talked about, Mark. A guy that can space the floor and guard a couple different positions and give IU a little bit of versatility if they want to play big or small and some of those things. Yeah, I think that he definitely of the newcomers is the one that I think could flourish perhaps the most in what he's going to be asked to do,
especially immediately.
Yeah. He's a guy too, talking about what we were talking about earlier of buying into a new role, all that kind of stuff of sitting him down and saying like, Miller, if you want to make the NBA, you don't need to average 14 points a game for Indiana like you did for Northwestern or whatever it was you had to average for Northwestern. We don't need that from you. You could make the league averaging 6.5 points a game next year for Indiana. Like if you just buy into what we need from you, which is knocking down a few threes a game, having some hustle, like, you know, like he is a guy that epitomizes that thing we were talking about earlier of like, I hope he does not look at his last 2 years at Northwestern, where 2 years ago he was a little more productive than he was last year. So now he's like, when I go to Indiana, I got to go back to the guy that was like, you know, running the offense and running the show. We don't need that from you, Miller. What we need is you to just hit shots,
you,
make shots, just be you, and the rest will take care of itself. And I think he'll do that, and I think it'll be awesome.
So, Mark, last question on this part. Any insight into? We talked a little about Coach Matta earlier. I think his role to everyone is a little bit nebulous in terms of what it actually is. Any insight from you? I don't know if you've exchanged any text or had any conversations with him that might shed some insight onto what exactly his role is and how he's spending his time.
I think he's figuring it out on the fly. I think Scott Dolson was smart in this regard that from what I can gather, it was basically a deal where Scott Dolson was like, I just want your magic around the program. Like that. I don't know what I want you to do yet. I just want some like osmosis to happen where you're just like around and like stuff gets absorbed and your presence. And so I think they're figuring it out, but I think that matters. And listen, the word that gets thrown out a ton when you talk about college basketball programs is culture, and it does become cliche and people roll their eyes when you talk about building a culture, because I think every new coaching staff says that in their introductory press conference. They want to play fast and they want to build a culture, right? Like those are the things that we always hear from these guys. But culture is a cliche for a reason, and I think you have to build a culture, and I think that Matta is great at that. And if that is what his role is just to like be around and like help build a culture, he's gonna be great at it. As far as the day-to-day, I don't think he knows yet. I don't know yet. I think that really might be it. Honest to God, is just kind of
just hang out,
just observe and figure it out, and like just be around. I don't know, be available. And I know this. He loves it. I know that. He called me. He called me the night of the national championship. It's like halftime, and it was a blowout, so I wasn't really that. But I was like locked in on the national championship. But I could step away and take a phone call for a second. And he calls me, and he's just like cackling. And I was like, "What's going on, coach?" And he's like, "You will not believe the setup I have down here." I was like, "What's going on?" He's like,
Mark, come
Like,
hang out.
yeah,
Have beers.
I know. I'm like, well, I gotta come to a game. He's like, oh, you're coming to a game. He's over the moon about the setup, and it might be because he's getting paid to like not really do much. I guess I don't know, but no, no, he loves the gig. He's a guy who definitely grew up an IU fan. I don't know if people knew that, by the way, that Coach Matta was because he was like I think he watched like the 76 Hoosiers. I think like he was the right age when the 76 Hoosiers happened, that it just kind of.
No wonder you guys got along. You both grew up Hoosiers and then went out and had success elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that was known. I think it was Dolson who brought it up during the press conference. But I certainly didn't know that about him. Prior to.
You get him around my dad, and they'll talk about 70s, 80s IU basketball. You have to like pull them. You have to pry them away from each other. So, to answer the question, I kind of can't answer the question because I don't think it's really defined, but I do from talking to Coach, I think that is kind of the mindset behind it is like, I don't know. We just want you around. And I think it's a smart move in the way I see it. Cause the guy knows more about winning in the Big Ten than just about anybody other than like Tom Izzo. I think that's involved in these programs right now. So,
well, one of the most interesting parts about that was that Woodson talked to Dolson about it. Before Dolson had was like Dolson may have had the kernel of the idea, but Woodson was like, hey, what about having Thad Matta around? And that to me, because if that hadn't been the case, you'd worry about like, is there any tension there? Does Thad be coaching the team? And does Woodson kind of not like this guy looking over his shoulder? But it was Woodson's like wanted it. And I think that is the key to the situation is that those guys are going to work well together because, Woodson knows he needs that.
Not a one-to-one comparison, but it kind of reminds me of when Steve Lavin was a coach at St. John's, and you turn on every St. John game, and Gene Cady would be sitting like 2 rows behind the bench, and you're like, why is Gene Cady at every game? And then like you'd start digging, and you realize because Cady and Lavin are guys, and it's whatever, and Cady's like not actually involved with the program, but he's always there, and you're like, what is he? He's doing something there. I can't really figure it out. Not a perfect comparison. But that's what I feel like. Whatever Gene Cady was doing for St. John's back then, I feel like.
Well, every game this year too, they're gonna have a shot at Thad in the crowd. Yeah, it's gonna be like Thad Matta. It's all. I think it's a great team up. I really do. I think it's gonna work really well.
So, Mark, any quick, way too early thoughts on how IU stacks up in the Big Ten? I know there's still a few dominoes to potentially fall with guys in the draft process, but what's your at least initial impression of kind of where they might fit in the pecking order?
I think IU is up there. I think there's if you're doing tiers, I'd have to really think. Ohio State, I think we're pretty optimistic. Those of us, the Buckeye fans in the world, despite how our season ended last year, I think most Ohio State fans are pretty optimistic. I have to imagine Purdue fans are gonna think they're gonna be pretty good. Michigan will be pretty good. Maryland made some moves. I think Maryland's kind of on par. More people seem to be excited about Maryland than Indiana, and I don't necessarily buy that. I think Indiana's up there. I think like Kentucky. I don't know why I say Kentucky. I'm looking at some of my screen to say Kentucky. I think Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan are kind of the cream of the crop, but Indiana, I think the Hoosiers are going to be pretty good. I think it's mostly the unknown. I think when you're going into the season and all the previews that you're going to see about Indiana and about the Big Ten rankings and all that kind of stuff, it's the unknown. And we know how this stuff works. Like UCLA was an 11 seed last year, and because they went to the Final Four and because they're bringing a lot of guys back and people know them, they're going to probably be the number 1 team in the country to start the season. And no one's going to stop and say, these guys were an 11 seed.
And Michigan State kind of gave the game away.
They gave the game, and because it's just easier to do what is known. And Purdue brings a lot of guys back, and Michigan, Michigan doesn't, but they have the number 1 recruiting class. And I think that just kind of is more known, like that formula. And the way IU's patch their team together is there's a lot of unknown.
And look at what IU's been the last few years. Sure. People are going to automatically assume, well, they haven't been good, regardless of all the other stuff, So I agree. Those preseason rankings really consider like they're really the easiest, like lowest common denominator. I think in a lot of cases.
I do it for a living. I'm telling you how the sausage is made. That's what I will. If you ask
we just
me
think Wisconsin last year. That was exactly the.
If you ask me to give you my top 5 in the country, I'm probably putting UCLA at 1 and Gonzaga at 2. Because it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I just made fun of people that do that. I would do the exact same thing. I'd be like, UCLA. Did you see how good they played in the tournament? They're bringing all those guys back. They're gonna be awesome.
It's gonna be an easy transition to a new season.
But no, I think if you're asking me expectations, I think that's a better way to frame it. Like, what should Indiana's expectation be? Tournament, obviously. I think even year 1, I think tournament, given the roster they have, they must make the NCAA tournament. I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say Sweet 16 or bust or anything like that, but I think must make the NCAA tournament. The top half of the Big Ten would be nice, but like, honestly, I think we have to, in talking about the changes in college basketball and the way everything's evolved, like, I think looking at that kind of stuff is kind of an old fashioned way of looking at it, because with imbalanced schedules and with how deep the Big Ten is and all that kind of stuff, like, I don't think finishing top half of the Big Ten, it looks bad to not finish top half of the Big Ten, but it doesn't mean what it used to mean. You know? So it's, I don't know. I think if you ask the IU coaches internally, my guess is they're saying our one big goal is just make the NCAA tournament. We must make the NCAA tournament, and not squeak in, not like an 11 seed, like play-in game type thing.
Have a comfortable selection Sunday.
Yes, there you go. A 7 seed or better. Yeah, like you're in. We're good. We were ranked throughout the year. And I think they'll do that. I think they will do that. So,
and let's be real, with the parity in college basketball nowadays, you make the tournament, you never know what can happen. I mean, it's just, especially when you're
about UCLA last year.
Yeah, especially when you're battle tested in the Big Ten. I mean, all those teams can make a run. They did it this year, but they definitely could.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, coming up in our third segment, we'll do some subscriber shout outs and answer a few questions. So stick around with us here on the Assembly Call. There's also and then Tony Stuckey in the chat. Good point. Maybe beat Purdue too. Yes, that would
that'd be nice.
That would be a desirable outcome at some point, for sure. Oh, all right. Well, we'll try to hit a few of these questions. I probably got to wrap up in probably 15, 20 minutes, but I think we can
I'm
hit.
Sorry, I'm running long.
We love it. Are you kidding me?
No, you're totally fine. I'm just trying to see my kid.
Hey,
no,
the
you're
more
good.
you talk, the less we have to talk.
I'm just trying to see my kids before they go to bed. So you're totally good. I got till like 10:30, so we're fine. I'm not, West Coasters like you guys. You guys are just getting warmed up now.
I'm going to the beach after this.
Do it. It's still light outside, Andy.
I know. It was like when I started.
Yeah, Mark. Whenever you come down to San Diego, man, let me know.
We got to go to a Padres game. I want to make that happen.
Have you ever been to Petco?
No. We got.
I'll get tickets. You let me know when you want to go.
Ryan.
I know people.
Ryan speaks glowingly of Petco.
It's the best, man.
Let's go.
Yeah, this summer. Let me know when you want to go.
All right. I'll hit you up
for sure.
I'll take you up on that.
Bring Moses. It's a dog-friendly park.
There.
Nice. Is it really?
Yeah, it is. It's Petco Park, dude.
That makes sense. That checks out. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
There's certain days you're allowed to bring your dogs. Yeah, just hang out.
Wow.
I was gonna say, they do them. Yeah, they do them in Cincinnati for, I don't know, maybe like one a month, but I would say it's pretty
regular here. I'm not. I'll have to check. Also, I don't know with the restrictions now what the rules are, but all right.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than hitting a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
And welcome back. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and special guest Mark Titus, and it's segment 3, which can only mean one thing.
Subscriber shout out.
All right, subscriber shout outs to the newsletter. The first one comes to us from Goshen, Indiana. It's Stephanie Seibel. Stephanie's favorite IU player is Steve Alford. Favorite host is Jared, but then posed the question, does he even count as a host anymore? And for special acknowledgement, Stephanie wrote, I'd like to acknowledge the alumni members of the IU Marching 100 and basketball bands, especially from 1985 to 1989. And the second subscriber shout out comes to us from St. Augustine, Florida. It's Dale Chatton. Dale's favorite Hoosier is a tie between Scott May and Yogi Ferrell. And for his assembly call leader, Dale took an interesting turn. He wrote, and I quote, Dan Dockage, he has this like and hate, not like or hate, but like and hate deal. You just can't separate those traits on Dan. He's an interesting fella if you can get by the hate Dan part. Thanks to Dale and Stephanie. So just so everybody knows, we're reading what these people are writing as a subscriber shout out. Some may have thought we would have omitted that part, but we did not. So here we
Dan
are.
loves the show, by the way.
Absolutely.
Mark.
Absolutely.
Loves the show. He's never said anything bad about it.
Definitely not. All right. Now it's time for the mailbag. All questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at and join at assemblycall.com/community. And we will start with.
It's not that good, but it's not that bad. It's Jay's mediocre question.
All right. So this from Jay, who actually sent this in much more in advance of the show than normal this week. I think it was Tuesday even.
He's usually right before showtime. So.
Usually we're under the gun, but not this time. So he said this might be one of the most important questions in assembly call history. Deserves the proper amount of preparation from the host. We'll leave it up to him to judge whether that preparation was actually done or not. If you have the same dining schedule as Tamar Bates and his family had for their first day in Bloomington, and for those who didn't see it, one of Tamar's family members basically like tweeted out a picture of their itinerary, which probably shows a little bit that they might not know the passion of IU basketball fans, as I'm sure they were then greeted by mobs of fans. Although students weren't on campus, but I'm sure the rest of their day was incrementally more interesting by virtue of them tweeting out the schedule. But their meal schedule, at least, was a late breakfast / brunch at Uptown Cafe, a late lunch at Buffalo's, and then dinner at Yanko's. So Ryan, I'll go to this, you at this first. Mark, you can feel free to jump in. I don't know what your feelings are on the Bloomington restaurant scene, so I won't put you on the spot if you don't want to be. But all right, so Ryan, Uptown, what is your go-to breakfast or brunch dish there?
Geez, I like the pancakes there. They're really good. We actually ate breakfast there when we were there for the meetup in last year, not this past year because we didn't do one. So yeah, I would say breakfast there. I don't know what I would get at Buffalo's. Probably wings, and then of course I feel like you have to get wings there.
Yeah, and then at Zagreb, I'm getting a medium rare filet probably. I think that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, you got to get the meatballs to start as the appetizer.
Oh yeah, the meatballs for sure. Yeah, and then medium rare filet. That's mine.
There you go, Mark. Any thoughts or experiences from those places on your visits to Bloomington?
I'm not familiar with those places, unfortunately.
All right. Well, if you guys do a tour stop in Bloomington, and
I know
Matta's got to take you to these. Yeah, he's got to give you the recruit treatment and take you to all the places they would take the recruits.
Yeah.
So you can
listen. I know places in Bloomington, but I kind of just know the staples. I know the Knicks and Mother Bears and Kilroy's and Opie Taylor's was a fan favorite. I heard it closed down. Unfortunately.
Oh, did it?
I believe it did.
That was
That's
my
fun.
brother.
They had good burgers. My
brother and dad's favorite spot. We go to Opie Taylor's before football games all the time. So those are kind of I stick to the basics because I'm a simple man and I don't know. So I haven't really I never lived in Bloomington. I didn't go to school at IU. So, I never really had time to really
explore.
Get sick of Kilroy's or Knicks, you know what I mean? Kilroy's always hits the spot when you come in for one game and you're like, yeah, let's just go to Knicks or Kilroy. That always works. But I imagine if I lived there, I would kind of get sick of it and want to try new stuff. But I never did.
Yeah.
So. Anyway.
Coach in the chat said that he and Mrs. Tonsoni are heading Bloomington on Saturday, and they're hitting up two of those, Buffalo's and Zagreb. So they're doing it right. All right, so let's see. I'm going to throw a couple of these ones that were specific to Mark because I think they're be good to hit, and some of the others we can push to later. All right, so this one's from JD. Can Mark elaborate a bit more on how Mike Davis was unable to recruit Greg Oden and Mike Conley to IU? What would it have taken for you to be a walk-on at IU?
It would have taken Mike Conley and Greg Oden going to IU, and I would have gone. I wanted to go to IU. My dad kind of didn't let me go to IU. It was a weird thing. I don't need to tell that story, but yeah, my dad was like, "Don't do that. Go do your own thing and go to Ohio State. Trust me, you'll like it there with Mike and Greg." I think I've told this story before, but I don't know if I've ever told it on this show. Basically, what happened with Greg really wanted to go to IU, I believe. That's my understanding. Mike liked it too. I mean, Mike was like, "What's not to like? It's Indiana. He's from Arkansas, but he's like, this is great." I think they were both very interested. Greg was like set on. I got to be careful. I got to choose my words carefully, so it's not IU fans don't run with it. Like, what? Greg Oden was about to commit? It wasn't that, but like Greg was like, "Yeah, that I really really like Indiana." And what happened? My understanding is that Mike Davis was sending Mike Conley the wrong mail. Mike Conley was receiving letters from Indiana that were made out to Sharon Collins, not Mike Conley, and this kept happening. And the Conley family was like, "Coach, please, for the love of God, like show our son some respect. He's a 5-star recruit." And it apparently just kept happening over and over. And my understanding is like that was enough for them to be like, all right, I don't really feel like this guy has it all together and isn't, the caliber. I don't know if that like it probably Coach Matta played a factor too. Just Coach Matta is awesome and is, I don't know, just came along at the right time and was building something at Ohio State. And it was like the chance to be a part of something, that was like the recruiting pitch, the chance to be the start of something special at Ohio State, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it was a combination of that. But yeah, the Sharon Collins story is what I had always heard. It has never been confirmed to me, but also maybe it has.
Yeah. Well, I was a senior when they were getting. I was a senior when you guys were all getting recruited, and I remember. I mean,
not us all.
Well, I remember you as a high school player because I would look at like the high school all-star stuff or whatever, and I remember seeing your name. But yeah, those two were like a huge deal on campus. And everyone was like, why haven't they committed to IU yet? Like, why, and then it wound up being Ohio State. And I mean, given the turmoil at Indiana at the time in the basketball program, I don't think anybody could really blame them for what they did.
I was kind of after we went to the NIT in 08, and then I'm watching guys I played against in high school at Indiana getting serious minutes for the Hoosiers during the lowest point in Indiana basketball history. Some small part of me was like, should have gone to Indiana. But then I look at the Final Four ring, and I'm like, maybe I should have stayed around.
No, I think I'm good. Yeah,
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think it worked out all right for you. All right, so the next one from Elbows In. Mark, I learned about the Titus and Tate podcast through Assembly Call, and am now regularly listening. Through your time on Assembly Call, I have a good idea of your background, but because I'm new to your pod, I'm curious, who is Tate, and how did you guys come together to do the podcast?
Oh boy, I
don't know how long you got to answer that question.
I'll make it quick. Tate was an intern. I worked at a website called Grantland. It was financed by ESPN. It was like a boutique deal. Bill Simmons ran it. And Tate was hired to be an intern pretty much at the exact same time Bill Simmons got fired from ESPN. And so Tate like shows up to LA. I didn't live in LA at the time, but Tate shows up to like report for duty as an intern for Grantland. And I was flying out to LA because basically Bill got fired and there was like an all hands on deck sort of situation of like, where do we go from here as a website, whatever. And on my trip to Los Angeles, as Tate had just arrived to be an intern, we did like an after meeting work drinks situation. And, I just started talking to him and picked his brain. And he said he went to North Carolina and he was a big college basketball fan. And a lot of people tell me they're college basketball fans out in Los Angeles, but none of them, they're like, I love college basketball. I love Zion Williamson. I'm like, that's it. That's all you got. That's all, So I started talking to Tate about college basketball and him being a Carolina fan and the stuff that he knew. I knew that he wasn't full of it. I knew that like he lived and breathed this game. And so that's kind of how it started. And then Bill started the Ringer, and Tate was just an intern at Grantland, so he wasn't married to working there. And he called up Tate and was like, hey, do you know how to record a podcast? And Tate said yes. So he hired Tate to the Ringer. Grantland folds. I go follow Bill to the Ringer. And then we started a podcast together, and that's pretty much it. So Tate's a Carolina guy. I represent the Midwest. It works out well. We got this symbiotic deal of like ACC, Big Ten, and I have the Ohio thing too. So he wants to argue Jordan and LeBron and like any argument you can think of in basketball, we have a way to kind of have both sides covered. So
did you guys have chemistry right away?
We kind of did, yeah. We talked about the you know what the big conversation we had on the first time we met was about Sean May. Because
really?
Yeah, Sean May was a huge talk. Like we talked about Sean May for like an hour straight, and I talked about watching Sean May in high school, and like you talk about like a guy that broke everyone's heart when he didn't go to IU.
Yeah,
Odin and Conley is nothing compared to Sean May. I remember that vividly, and just like the betrayal, and then Tate, of course, loves him because Tate,
of course.
In 2005, like that was Tate's first national championship that he experienced as a fan of Carolina because he's a little younger. So he loves Sean May, and I was like, no.
Just no.
No.
So when they were talking, when Sean May was proposed as a potential assistant coach at
I
IU, I was like, how's
like,
that gonna
no.
like on one hand maybe, but on the other hand no.
I was at the game at Assembly Hall when Sean May came back for the
so was I
challenge, and I have never in my life heard anyone get booed as loud as that man got booed. I
was in the student section for that, and
wild.
Like so my senior year I was reporting for the Indiana Daily Student in the Duke IU game, and people were like, "Oh, Josh McRoberts is going to get it way worse than Sean May." I was like, "No, he's not.
No, he's not.
Like, no, he's not."
Josh McRoberts
he got it bad,
and then McRoberts was bad, but it was not.
McRoberts
it was not
bad.
at the level. Yeah,
but Josh McRoberts didn't grow up in Bloomington, Indiana, with a father who is a legend, like not just a legend, maybe the legend, arguably like the legend of the school, and. Come on. It can't get worse than that.
The Sean May sucks chant, I think that was fall of 2004. The Sean May sucks chant, like it still rings in my ears. It was that
loud. So then you guys have, it was Teed Up was the original name, right? And then was there an iteration between that and?
We started a podcast that was called Teed Up, and we found that no one knew how to search for it because he didn't know how to spell teed.
It's a good idea.
T-E-E-G is a T. So they wanted to come up with a new name. Bill loved the idea of One Shining Podcast, which like I wasn't huge on, but I was like, what? Like I was, because at the time Teed Up was under like this big feed of The Ringer where they did like a bunch of different college shows, like some football, some like other sport, and we were all just under the same feed. So when he decided to change the name, they were going to give us our own feed, and I was just excited to have my own feed. So I was like, whatever it takes. And he's like, well, it takes being called One Shining Podcast. And I was like, all right, whatever. That's fine. I'll take it. So yeah, that was that. And then we eventually left The Ringer. So we had to let the name stay with them. And we, came up with a very original name of Titus.
Hey,
we worked real hard on that one.
I should have thought
weeks of workshopping. And
I don't know what happens now if I ever leave Fox though, which I have no desire or plans to, but, It's a deal where it's like I'm a professional wrestler where like they own my name now.
You've given them rights to your name. Now
you have my name. You own my name. I can't do a show called Titus anymore. Like what?
You have to be Mark the Shark wherever you go now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I forgot about the One Shining Podcast, although it was funny. We were joking with you about wearing the Hickory shirt before the show. I thought of it. I should have gotten my friend of the program shirt on before I came down here.
Oh, nice.
So
bag dropper.
I know. All right, so let's see. Let's hit a couple more of these here as we go. Kathy asked, looking at the schedule, we now have, which is a little limited. So, Notre Dame and the Crossroads. So this is more of a Big Ten question. Mm-hmm. But her question was, what game are you most looking forward to? She said you can't pick Purdue. So just as we go through here, the teams that IU plays twice are Purdue, Maryland, Minnesota. Well, let's do the ones that matter. Purdue, Maryland, Ohio State, Wisconsin. They've got Illinois, Michigan, Rutgers at home, at Iowa, at Michigan State, and at Northwestern. So, Ryan, I'll let you take that first. What Big Ten game stands out to you the most that you'd want to be at if you could outside of the home game against Purdue? Well, I mean, it's what you're looking forward to most, but I feel like, if you're looking forward to it that much, you'd want to be there. So.
Michigan, because it's going to be a measuring stick game and it's at home. I think that'll be a great matchup. Obviously, the games I'm looking forward to the most since our current guest, I'm looking forward to Ohio State because Mark will come back and hang out, and or maybe even be there because he's got the Thad connection. But no, I think Michigan, because I think that's going to be a measuring stick, and it's going to be one of the big home games for in Mike Woodson's first year, and you get the crowd that you get for those big home games. And so that's the first one that popped off to me was probably Michigan at home.
I would agree with that just because the comparison with Juwan Howard and Mike Woodson, that was that was when Mike Woodson was hired. That's all anyone talked about. It felt like was that Indiana
Guy coming home.
They think they found their Juwan Howard, and yeah, it's going to be a big measure. And beyond that, Michigan might be the best team in the Big Ten next year. I don't know. They might not, but they certainly on paper look like they could be. So that'll be, as you said, Ryan, a big measuring stick. Mine would be though, like if theoretically, I mean, it's not going to happen, but I feel like the welcome to the Mike Woodson era moment was going to be the ACC Big Ten Challenge when like Duke or Carolina came in, or maybe Virginia. Maybe Virginia will be, but I don't think Virginia has that cachet. I'm just picturing a Tuesday night 9 p.m. tip.
Armand Franklin coming back to IU.
Oh,
too.
Armand Franklin back.
Because Virginia,
and it's Virginia. Like it's a top 5 ACC team, and Indiana's like ranked 21st or something because it's still early in the season and no one believes in them and all that. And Assembly Hall is just drunk like it hasn't been drunk in years, and the place is just rocking. And we're coming out of a pandemic where the fans couldn't be there last year, and it's just absolutely nuts. And then Marco Killingsworth hits it. Oh, sorry, I'm crossing.
Yeah, no, don't get them started. I was there.
Don't get Ryan started on that one. Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see who they draw in that, because I think that they should have a home game.
They're going to give Coach K a home game, right?
Yeah, they're giving Coach K the home game.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll have it, but I know IU is slated to have a home game this year based on the way that it typically would go. So that would definitely be an interesting one, depending upon the opponent. I think the Ohio State game at home will be an interesting one as well. Again, upper tier Big Ten team. I think the Holtman piece of it for IU fans struggling. IU struggling to beat him since he's been at Ohio State. And some of those things I think would be
I'm worried.
Would be a big game.
I'm worried about Thad's connection. That's going to tear, because I know we're going to get cheated. I know Ohio State's going to get cheated. I just know it's going to happen. I know Thad's going to pull some string. I know what's coming, and I'm still upset about it all these months.
So Mark, if you end up going to that game, I don't know. You would know Coach Matta better. What do you show up to that game in? If you had to choose a school, do you have to get one of those like house divided things made up where you can?
I'm still cheering for Ohio State. If Thad Matta was the head coach at Indiana, that we've arrived at a point where it'd be very difficult for me to pick a side. But but he's not on staff, so come on. I'm a Buckeye. Come on.
Yeah. I got you. All right, let's hit one more here. I thought I had one that was good. I guess this is another one. So somebody kind of talked with Woodson about if he effectively got the last 2 months right, which I think everybody feels like he did. What are some key things over the next couple months to get it right in terms of, this is really more of a recruiting, player development time period. But what are some things? I'll throw this to you first, Ryan, that you would be looking for him to do over the next couple months to really keep the momentum going that he's built so far.
I think one thing is certainly there's going to be some recruits coming in. He's got to pick up at least one probably over the next 2 months because there's going to be guys visiting, hopefully 2. But that would show that kids are outside of the program are buying into what he's selling. Kids who aren't currently in college are buying into the program. The other thing I would say is he's got to develop the shooters. I mean, it's going to be hard for us to see and to know, but this team has to shoot better. And that's really the thing that's been holding them back over the last few years and something that Woodson wants to lean heavily on. So I don't know if it's, putting out some really well produced videos on how these guys are working on their shooting or whatever. I don't know how it's going to make us feel better, but really these guys have to improve their shooting percentage.
That's what I was going to say. I need number one for me is I need more videos of Trace Jackson Davis using his right hand. I just need I need the Twitter account just spitting these out, and really just the team making shots in general. That would be big. Number 2 is the way Mike Woodson wins is I also get videos. I get multimedia coverage of Mike Woodson at Indiana football tailgates.
Nice.
He's just mingling amongst the people. He's supporting the Hoosier football team. I think that's how he wins. I think that's he establishes that marriage with Tom Allen, and it's a symbiotic rocket ship to the moon. And that's
they give pregame speeches at each other's games.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
But like in all honesty, it is kind of a behind the scenes period, right? So like I think Ryan's right. Like landing a recruit, having these guys on campus, like getting one of these guys to commit would be awesome. But I think the work he's going to do now, the way he wins now, is stuff you're not going to see until the season starts. So,
Yeah, the one thing Coach Marlowe in the chat put in about more media availability, I think that's one thing. There's been seems to be a different level of transparency and access to the program than there had been previously. So I think fans have really gravitated toward that. So I think hearing more from him, from the staff, potentially from Coach Matta, stuff like that would be another way to do that. But I agree with you guys in general, just in terms of being able to do that behind the scenes development. So. All right, so that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday or sooner if any news breaks. Until then.
Take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
I like everything about that.
All right. Well, Mark, we appreciate you joining us as always.
Anytime, guys. Sorry if I kept you from your children.
No, you're good. You're good. They're out of school, so they're home with me all day now while I'm working. So it wasn't that I was gonna go up and tell them goodnight. So you're totally good. We appreciate it, and glad to have you hop on as usual, and surely have you on as the season gets closer. And
love it
and all that.
I am going to go visit Coach Matta for real. I'm super excited about it because my dad also, like, I know I brought him up, but like I was getting emotional. Not on the show, but like I get emotional talking to my dad because he's like finally buying back into the. He's been out since Knight was fired, and not because he just kind of like I don't know. And my dad loves Indiana basketball so much, and like he's back in, and like he hasn't. I don't think he's gone to a game in like 6 years or something.
Wow.
And it's not a protest. It's just like. I don't know. My heart's not.
He's not feeling it.
He's just not feeling it. And like for the first time, my dad's like, I want to go to campus. I want to visit Coach Matta. I want to go to practice. I'm like, Dad, I'll get you into practice. He's like, can you do that and all that? So I'm gonna be. I will be in Bloomington a lot, and I'll try to be around the program as much as possible because I don't know. You put me on the spot, Andy. In all honesty, like if Thad was the coach at IU, I would cheer for IU. If Thad was the coach at Michigan, I'd cheer for Michigan. Like I don't know.
Your connection's there.
I fucking love the guy. Yeah.
Well, we're going to be doing a bunch more live events in Bloomington over the next couple of years, so we'll definitely be there that sometime you are, and we'll all meet up and hang out.
In the meantime, I got to get to San Diego. I'll go to a game. I'll hit you. I got your number, right? Like we have.
You have my. I think you have my email. You can DM me on Twitter. We're following, but I'll hit you up on email and send you my information so you can.
My June is booked solid, but July.
Yeah, we got all summer in San Diego. It's wonderful.
Let's go.
All right,
fellas. Appreciate it as always.
Yeah, man. Thanks for hopping on.
Thanks a lot, Mark, and take care. All right.
See you guys.
Thanks, everybody. We will
later, Andy.
see you next. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.